Howdy. Good morning, everyone. Aaron Boster here, representing the Boster Center for Multiple Sclerosis. I am super excited for this August live stream. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Flipped my camera on, super excited for folks to join us. So Nicholas has jumped on, Ontario, Canada, representing in the house. Sherilyn, welcome, and thank you for joining us today. Bluthton is in the house, one of our amazing moderators. Hello, good sir. Tracy Lane is in the house. I'm very, very glad to hear that. Sterling is in the house. Jennifer is in the house. OHIO, representing Springfield, Ohio. Good morning, Vivian. Good morning, Bruce, representing Kansas. We've got Miss Devricks in the house, representing Nashville. Welcome, welcome. Another one of our amazing moderators has just jumped online, Joe Siders. Hello, sir. Good morning, everyone. Hello, L. Hoffman. Hello, Sandra. Hello, Donna. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Hello, Karen Munsley. As you jump online, of course, make sure you're sharing where you're jumping on from. It's amazing to go back through this chat and look at this growing global online village. It's amazing to see where you're all coming in from. We've got British Columbia in the house. Hello, Candy Duncan. Great to see you. Kansas representing. The UK is representing. We've got London, Ohio as well. Someone screamed, "Go blue." I'm not going to argue with you. Good morning. It is a gorgeous August morning here in Central Ohio. It's been a couple months since we've kicked off a live stream, and I am absolutely thrilled to be with you today. Deborah's in the house, representing North Carolina. We've got Massachusetts in the house. Hello, everyone. Christopher French from Indiana. Thank you for being here. We've got Washington State in the house and Long Island, New York representing. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Donna Nichols, great to see you. Where in Texas do you hail from, Donna? We've got Utah in the house. Hello, Carl. Hello, Tricia. Great to see you from Wisconsin. This is so fantastic. Elizabeth Thomas is in the house. We've got Virginia representing. This is phenomenal. Bienvenue à France. Ça fait plaisir. Il est quelle heure là-bas? J'imagine que c'est 15 ou 16 heures, peut-être. Je sais pas. Hot as always in Texas. I hear that. It's actually kind of hot here in Ohio right now, but probably not like in Texas. We've got Kansas representing. Good morning from Missouri. This is fantastic. Nashville representing. Phenomenal. Idaho representing. Thank you for being here, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're going to be kicking off our live stream. I'll be flipping the cameras on and answering your questions live at the top of the hour at exactly 11 a.m. PG has got a question. Hold that question until we start the Q&A, and I'll be excited to answer it. I'll be answering questions for at least a solid hour. Un tout petit peu quand même, Neil. Merci. We've got ATL in the house. Monica, what's shaking? How are you? Jennifer's in the house. Muggy, hot, and humid. Yep, you're describing Ohio. That's for darn sure. PG, of course. I'll be excited to answer that question. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. This is Aaron Boster, representing the Boster Center for Multiple Sclerosis, where we care for families impacted by MS literally from around the globe. I am super excited to be kicking off this August live stream with you. We'll turn the camera on and start to tackle your questions live at the top of the hour at 11 a.m. As you jump online, please share where you're jumping on from. It's amazing to see where everyone has gathered in this global glowing online village. There's already 79 of you, including Allison from West Yorkshire, UK. I don't know that name, Joe. Got Tennessee here. Audio is pretty quiet. Gosh darn it, let me see what I can do about that. One day I'm going to have to get smart about this stuff, guys. My audio has been giving me fits. Do me a favor, for those of you that have jumped online, tell me if you can hear my audio okay. 3, 2, 1. Mary had a little lamb, over. I've got an exciting announcement that I'll be making today about the Boster Center and some really, really exciting growth that we're experiencing. So I'll be super thrilled to share that with you today. Vivian says that the audio is okay for her. Dr. Brandon Bieber is in the house. What's going on, my friend? For all of you jumping on, say a big howdy hi to Dr. Brandon Bieber. He's a buddy of mine on the YouTubes. He's an amazing MS neurologist out in California. He's also got a fantastic YouTube channel. So if you're not checking Brandon Bieber out, boy, you're missing out. He puts out a video every Wednesday, and I look forward to watching it every Wednesday morning. Great to see you, my friend. I hope that you're doing well. Everybody say hi to Dr. Bieber, please. Some people say the audio is okay. Others are saying they can't hear me. Gosh, I'm not sure what to do about that. Cassie says, hello, the other Dr. B. I guess there's two of us, right? Jersey in the house. I love it. Hello, Renee. Welcome. Welcome, welcome. Nads is in the house. What's going on? All right, Joe, I'm glad to hear that you can hear me. Thank you very much. As we get rocking and rolling and turn the camera on, please keep in mind that I can't treat or diagnose you on the interwebs. Please keep your questions generalizable so that everybody can benefit from the answers. Dr. Bieber, I hope you feel the love, my friend. We've got Connecticut in the house. Hello, Jim. Thanks for being here. Dr. B squared. There you go. I like that a lot. Naz is going through some crap gap. My heart goes out to you. We've got Michigan in the house. Soren, hello and welcome. Bonjour, Agnes. All right, I'm really glad that Yvonne can hear me. That's fantastic. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I will be turning the camera on, and we'll start the questions at the top of the hour. It's only about 20 short minutes. I'm going to step away from the camera here so I can get myself ready. Please feel free to take a bio break. Please grab some water because you know we do the MS Water Challenge. You know how it is. And of course, as you come on, say hello, howdy, hi to those that are in the chat and share where you're coming on from. Karen, it was great to see you too. Neil, that's a great question. Hold that question. We'll answer it when we go live. Yvette's calling in from the UK. What time is it in the UK right now? Christopher, I'm really glad to hear that. Guys, I'll be right back. Make yourself comfy and cozy. Make sure to grab a beverage. We'll go live here in about 20 minutes. I'm back, yo. Good morning, everyone. Aaron Boster here. Super excited to launch our August live stream. We're going to be turning the cameras on and answering your questions about multiple sclerosis at the top of the hour in 19 short minutes. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We've got Virginia in the house, both Staunton and Fairfax representing. Richmond, Indiana is here. Welcome. Thank you for being here very much. As you jump online, please make sure to where you're jumping on from. I love going back and learning where this glowing online village has amassed from. Sydney, Australia, burning the midnight oil. Thank you for being here. Janine, this is fantastic. I am so excited to kick things off and answer your questions live. I also have some really exciting growth announcements about the Boster Center for MS that I've been thrilled to share with you today. Baltimore, Ohio is in the house. Welcome, welcome, welcome. C'est pas mauvais de, de marier un Américain. On est quand même sympathique. Candace is in the house. Welcome, Candace. Thank you for being here. Strategy Incorporated. It is my honor and pleasure to do this. It's something I look forward to every single month. What's going on, Charlotte? Thank you for being here. Adrian's got a great question. Hold on to that question and we'll tackle it in 15 short minutes. Welcome, everyone. Aaron Boster here, representing the Boster Center for Multiple Sclerosis, where we care for families impacted by MS literally from around the globe. I've been kicking off monthly live streams, almost for about 5 years now. And it is such a cool opportunity for me to get to connect with you and tackle your MS questions live on the spot. Yeah, Dr. Bieber's out in California, so he must be up pretty early. But I know he has children, so he might have to get up early anyways. Turtle, we will tackle that question during the live. Keep that question hot and ready. And I would love to help you understand that a little bit better. There's 78 of you that have jumped online. We've got 15 minutes until we jump online. What time is it, Vivian? Yep, kids are already up. That's what I thought, Brandon. I'm setting up a quick polling question. Our first polling question just got thrown up in the chat. Take a second and answer. What's your favorite season of the year? Oh, Angela, thank you for saying that. That's really awesome. I really appreciate it. 7:45 in Cali. Sterling, that's a great question. Again, we'll be answering questions at the top of the hour in 14 short minutes. Thank you for being here. Stay tuned. 79 of you have just jumped online. Take a second and answer the polling question. There's only 35 votes. Now, come on, y'all. What's your favorite season? Joe Siders, as always, leading the way. Joe just put up a link to the Boster Corner. This is a free monthly newsletter that you can sign up for if you like, where we share the latest and greatest of what's going on at the Boster Center for Multiple Sclerosis. And we include every time that I present, whether that be in a public forum or these online Q&As. So if you don't want to miss a future live stream, feel free to sign up for the Boster Corner. It's free to sign up and you can cancel at any time, of course. And we will mail you out once a month an email with all of this information. I hope that you find it to be educational and you'll know when we go live. Jennifer Jones, what's going on? Good to see you. I'm going to leave the polling question open for maybe just another minute. There's been 57 votes. If you haven't voted yet, make sure to vote before we close the polling question. What's your favorite season? Carrie Perry, you know, I actually share your opinion. My favorite season, without question, is fall, and I joke that it's the best 3 weeks of the year. What's up, Jennifer Smith? Thank you for jumping on. Rebecca loves herself some spring and fall. We're about to close the polling question. Just a few more seconds. If you haven't answered yet, please take a chance to do so. All right, shutting down the polling question. The majority of the viewers who have jumped online today agreed with me that fall is the very best, followed by spring. There's only about 6% that dig themselves some winter time. Throwing another polling question in the chat. What time do you go to bed? Jen McGraw's in the house representing Maryland. Jen's another one of our amazing moderators. Jen, thank you very much for being here. It's great to see you. I hope you and yours are doing great. We've got 11 minutes until we go live at the top of the hour. There's 92 of you that have already jumped online, filling my heart with joy. Thank you so much for being here. As you jump online, of course, share where you're jumping on from. I'd love to go back and look through the chat after this ends and see exactly where this growing global online village has amassed from. It's absolutely amazing. When we get started answering questions, please kindly make sure that your question is generalizable. I can't treat or diagnose you on the interwebs, so please make the question a general one so that everyone can benefit from the answer. Again, we're going to be starting to answer your questions in 11 short minutes at the top of the hour. Thank you for being here. Jennifer Jones is in the house. Thank you for being here. David's in the house representing Colchester, UK. I probably mispronounced that, and if so, I apologize, David. Elizabeth goes to bed before 10 at 9 p.m. How about the rest of you? What is your preferred bedtime? There's been 55 votes, but there's 100 of you that have jumped online, which means we should expect several more votes over the next couple minutes. What time do you go to bed? Chris is in Scotland, UK, representing. Thank you for being here, Chris. Thank you, Phil. And thanks for being here. Texas is in the house. Worcestershire sauce. In there in the polling question, take a second and click your answer. Alberta, Canada is in the house. Lori, thank you for being here. And yes, goes to bed at 10 p.m. It's 4 p.m. in Scotland. Well, Hazel, thank you very much for being here. Which part of Scotland do you hail from, Hazel? Long Island is in the house. What's going on, Donna? New York representing. There's 112 of you that have jumped online. Wow, that is absolutely amazing. I am so excited to talk with you all today. I'll be turning my camera on and you can see my ugly mug, and I'll answer your questions live at the top of the hour in 9 short minutes. Roland, I don't know where that is. I've got to check a map out here, man. St. Andrews is, okay, right on. Well, thank you for being here, Hazel. All right, we're about to close the polling question. There's some of you that haven't answered. Click your answer. Well, what's your preferred bedtime? Cassie, that's super smart. Donna, great question. Let's tackle that. Candy just saw 130, and I see 130 also. That may be the most number of people amassed as we start up a live stream in the history of doing this for the last 5 years. Love My Cats is in the house representing my hometown of Columbus, Ohio. Good morning, Stephen. Thank you for being here. Studpud, that's a Stewpud, sorry. Thank you for being here. What's going on? Art representing the West Coast. 8 minutes until we go live. If you haven't yet signed up for the Boster Corner, please consider doing so. I've got a link up on the chat from none other than our moderator, Joe Siders. If you click that link, you can sign up for the Boster Corner, which is a free newsletter, a monthly newsletter that we will email to you with the latest and greatest in MS research and everything that's going on at the Boster Center for MS. And it'll tell you when we go live, so you can find the times and the places easily. Paige is in the house representing New Jersey. What's going on, Paige? Oscar in the house, London represented. Stewpud, Aussie, right on. Thank you for being here. What time is it over there, Stu? Strategic Incorporated wants to understand where I get off speaking French. Au fait, j'étais un étudiant de change pendant le lycée. Alors, ça fait très longtemps, presque 30 ans. Mais j'habitais avec des familles d'accueil. J'étais en première ES par une année scolaire. C'était absolument génial. Joe, thank you for reminding people that we have to make sure that the questions are generalizable so that everyone can benefit. I'm closing the polling question. There's been 96 answers. Most of us are going to bed between 10 and 12. The reality is that people impacted by MS absolutely need their snooze. And getting less than 7 hours of sleep oftentimes can really knock your legs out from under you when you start your day. Jennifer, that's correct. Yep, I was an exchange student in northern France 100 years ago when I had a full head of hair. Cheryl, thank you for being here representing British Columbia. 6 minutes until we go live. Thank you for being here. Janine, I'm happy to discuss sleep apnea, happy to discuss CPAP and other tools to beat sleep apnea and talk about how important it is to tackle sleep apnea in the setting of multiple sclerosis. Veggie Tea is in the house. Welcome, welcome, welcome. As you jump online, of course, make sure you share where you're jumping on from. Suzanne K is joining us from Michigan. Where in Michigan are you from? Vivian, that's a good question. We'll start tackling questions here in 5 short minutes. McGee is in the house. What's going on, Sheila? Representing New Jersey. London, UK. Plymouth. I used to live in Ypsilanti, Suzanne. I know where Plymouth is. Nice part of the world. Georgia representing. What's going on, Daniel? Thank you for being here, good sir. 5 minutes until we go live. Wyoming is in the house. Memphis, Tennessee representing. What's going on, Stefan? We've got Alaska in the house. JS, where in Alaska do you hail from? California. This is amazing. You guys are up so early for this. I am absolutely tickled. Very soon we're going to turn the cameras on. Now you know how we do it. Make sure that you've got your water for the MS Water Challenge. We'll be doing that throughout the live stream. I, of course, have my trusty coffee at the ready. I'm going to go fill up my coffee cup and be back in a few short seconds. Guys, find the flame key on your keyboard, just like Bluthton did, because when we get 3 minutes out, you know how we do it. We're going to flame up the chat. Miss Taylor, yeah, I do that all the time. We have patients that have come and seen us from every state in the union except Hawaii and Iowa. So I'm dying to get someone to visit us from Hawaii and Iowa. Jennifer, you're absolutely right. I turn coffee and caffeine into neurology on the daily. Welcome, everyone. We've got 3 minutes. And when there's 3 minutes left, you know what time it is. It's time to flame up the chat. Take a lead from Paige and flame up the chat, guys. We want to get the entire chat completely flamed up. This will show the YouTube algorithm that you love what we're doing here and helps push this content out so more families impacted by MS can benefit. So take it away, Taylor. Take it away, Robert B. Take it away, Jasmine. We've got flames coming from Rochelle. We've got flames galore. All right. Hit the flame button, guys. We want to keep the flames going for a full 3 minutes. That's how we teach this YouTube algorithm that we are here, and we are pumped to tackle multiple sclerosis with an Ask Me Anything MS. There's 128 of you that have jumped online. Ruckin, we're not asking questions right now, partner. We're flaming up the chat. We'll handle those questions in 2 short minutes, but until then, show me some love in the chat, guys. Go ahead and flame it up for me. Veggie T has got the right idea. Andrew Bruce has got the right idea. Donna's got it going on. Look at Bluthton leading the way. Sparta is in the house. This is how we roll, Jennifer. Jennifer McGraw's got it going on. Carrie Perry showing explosions galore. It's starting to get really exciting, guys. We have 2 minutes until we go live. Keep those flames going. Just spam that flame key. Vivian, I think that's the coolest thing I've ever seen. I love it. She can't find the flame button, so she threw up a Canadian representative. I dig that very, very much. Roxana's got the right idea. Phil Winmore's got the right idea. We've got 2 minutes until we go live. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Poland is in the house. That's amazing. Bird's got the right idea. Rochelle's got the right idea. Barb has got the right idea. Come on, guys. Show me love. Let's get it going. You know how we do it. We've got 1 short minute until we turn the cameras on and go live and tackle your questions. Police in the building? I certainly hope not. Amy's in the house. 1 minute until we go live. I can't wait to turn these cameras on. Keep the flames going. Flame up that chat and let the YouTube algorithm know that we are excited and pumped for today. This helps push out this algorithm so that more people can find us and benefit and learn and up their game and learn how to make MS boring. That's exactly right. We've got 1 minute until we go live. Less than 60 seconds. Let's get the flames galore. Suzanne has got it going on. JS has got it going on. Miss Taylor is flaming up the chat something fierce. Karen is flaming up the chat. And it's time. We are live. Hey! Howdy, everyone. Aaron Boster here. I am absolutely stoked to be here with you today. There's 141 of you that have already jumped online, and that's amazing. Thank you, each and every one of you that have jumped on. Of course, my name is Aaron Boster, representing the Boster Center for Multiple Sclerosis in Central Ohio, where we care for families impacted by MS from around the globe. For the last 5 years, I've tried to do a monthly live stream where we turn the cameras on at least once a month and tackle your MS questions live. So that's what I'm excited to do over the next hour. I've got my coffee at the ready. You know how I do it. I love coffee so much. Sometimes I go to bed at night thinking, man, when I get up, I can have a cup of coffee. Woo-wee! Thank you all for being here. As you jump online, please make sure that you share where you're jumping on from. I'd love to go back through the chat and see where this growing global online village has amassed from. It fills my heart with joy. So please make sure you share in the chat where you're coming from as you jump online. Also, as I start to answer your questions, please keep in mind that I can't provide a diagnosis or a treatment across the interwebs with just a small blip that you've provided. So please make sure that your questions are generalizable so that everyone can benefit from them. That'll make things much more smooth, and I really appreciate that. You'll see some names in blue in the chat. These are our amazing moderators. These are amazing human beings who have volunteered their time to help me make this a very successful event. The moderators will help pick out questions and throw them up so that I can see them. Also, if you're sassy pants, the moderators might put you in timeout. All right, so let's get rocking and rolling. I do have a really exciting announcement today. We've had some massive growth at the Boster Center for MS, and we're poised to do something that I'm very, very excited and proud of, something that I don't think has ever been done in the United States before. And so I'm going to be sharing that with you about partway through this live stream. So make sure that you tune in for that. All right, let's start to tackle some questions. Our first question today comes from Jimmy Fox. And Jimmy writes, status of BTK inhibitors for PPMS. Jimmy from Texas, in the winter and Colorado in the summer. Well, first of all, Jimmy, all of us are very jealous of you because that's a nice way to do it. Texas in the winter and Colorado in the summer. That sounds ideal. Jimmy's question is extremely contemporaneous, and there's a tremendous groundswell of excitement surrounding BTK inhibitors. Now, for those of you that have been following the channel for a few years, we've been intimately involved in BTK inhibitor research at the Boster Center for MS, as have many MS researchers throughout the world right now. Bruton tyrosine kinase is what BTK stands for. And the BTK inhibition is a really clever way of trying to treat MS. It does two things which are really fantastic. Now, if you think about some of the most successful treatments for MS currently, a lot of them are B-cell depleters, medicines which deplete your B cells. These are medicines like Ocrevus, Rituxan, Briumvi, Kesimpta, and they're very, very effective medicines, but they come with some baggage, and there's a risk of infection, particularly if you've been on them for a long time. A BTK inhibitor affects B cells, but it doesn't murder the B cell. It doesn't suppress the B cell. It just breaks some of the internal machinery of the B cell so that it can't communicate. It doesn't kill the B cell. It just makes it so that it can't communicate. So it's kind of like the other cells are like, la, 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 I can't hear you. And it interrupts the pathology of multiple sclerosis. And so BTK inhibitors can make a B cell less functional without murder. And what we found is that decreases risk of infection, which is pretty freaking awesome. A second thing that BTK inhibitors do, which none of the 28 different formulations of current MS medicines are capable of doing, is crossing the blood-brain barrier to enter into the supercomputer, the brain, the holiest of holies, and identify a second cell type, a cell called microglia. Now, microglia are part of the immune system, but they're not part of the adaptive B-cell, T-cell immune system that lives in the bloodstream. The microglia are part of a different side of the immune system called the innate immune system. And we know that the innate immune system and that microglia are very active and they do naughty, naughty things in the setting of MS, but we've never been able to reach them. Microglia live only in the brain. Many of our therapies can't reach them and can't impact them. BTK inhibitors can. And so in addition to sort of like making a B cell dysfunctional without murder, it also enters the blood-brain barrier, enters the brain, and turns off activated microglia. So BTK inhibitors offer a lot of potential for what we might be able to do to treat multiple sclerosis in somewhat of a novel way. There's been a lot of research efforts over the past several years. I'm very proud that at the Boster Center we've been doing a lot of these clinical trials. Thus far, we've had a readout on 2 relapsing remitting clinical trials that have not worked. The BTK inhibitor was not able to demonstrate success beyond standard of care, and it doesn't look like, at least with those compounds, that we're going to see utilization in relapsing MS. There are other relapsing MS trials that we're involved in, which are ongoing, and so we're very hopeful that those are going to work out, but the jury's out. We also did a really, really exciting study that I'm very honored to have participated in called the Hercules trial. Hercules. And the Hercules trial looked at one of the BTK inhibitors, a drug called tolobrutinib. I didn't make up these words. Tolobrutinib. And in this Hercules trial, we gave people with secondary progressive multiple sclerosis this medicine. And secondary progressive MS in specific, we enrolled people with SPMS who have not had attacks in many years. And so these were folks that were getting worse in their neurological disability. They were getting worse over time, but they weren't having attacks. And in the Hercules trial, everybody took a pill. They either took a placebo, a sugar pill, a dummy drug, or they took the BTK inhibitor. And they didn't know which one they were on, and we didn't know which one they were on. That's called double blind. And it worked. The Hercules trial was terribly successful. And in fact, we were able to slow down MS in a population without attacks by 29%. And that's a really, really big deal. We've never been able to do that in the history of MS therapies. Now, this is so exciting that the American FDA looked at the data and identified it as breakthrough status, and they're fast tracking getting this approved through the FDA. So the fast track is a way of rapidly getting the drug through regulatory evaluation so that it can be made available more quickly. Many of us remember that they fast tracked the approval for the COVID vaccines. And so that's what's happening with tolobrutinib, one of the BTK inhibitors, right now with secondary progressive MS. It is possible that we may have an SPMS indication for this new therapy as early as October. And so that's very, very exciting. Now, Jimmy Fox asked specifically about primary progressive MS, and we're involved in a trial called the Perseus trial. And in the Perseus trial, we're studying primary progressive MS patients using BTK inhibitors. We have several patients at the Boster Center for MS who are active participants in the Perseus trial, and we're very hopeful and excited about the potential results. This drug worked in progression with secondary progressive MS without relapses. It stands to reason that this drug may work in primary progressive MS as well. As many of you know, presently there's only one drug that's been FDA approved for primary progressive MS, one drug approved in the EMA, the same drug, ocrelizumab, Ocrevus, one of the B-cell depleters. And it would be revolutionary, quite literally, if we had a second approved therapy that we knew worked in the setting of primary progressive MS. That was a fantastic question, Jimmy. Thank you very much for asking it. I've spoken so much that I'm a little parched, and when I'm parched, you know what time it is. It's the MS Water Challenge, yo. When I drink, you drink. Ah, that's really tasty. All right, let's take another question. Bluthton, one of our moderators, is helping out. He's identified a question and thrown it forward. I'm dyslexic, so it's hard for me to see all these moving questions, and so I really appreciate the moderators. So, Bluthton's question, qualitative experience more important than quantitative experience. My doctor's practiced for 45 years and won't prescribe stronger medicines. Nah, okay, all right, so Bluthton's bringing up two very important points. Qualitative experience versus quantitative experience. What does that mean? Are you making decisions based on data, or are you making decisions based on experience? And in my opinion, you need absolutely both. So I went to medical school for 4 years, and then I went to neurology residency for 4 years where I learned to be a neurologist. And then I did 2 years of fellowship training where I specialized in multiple sclerosis. And during those 2 years, I published 8 papers, and I read thousands of papers on multiple sclerosis. And I have continued to stay up on the medical literature in MS because the understanding of the data is critical as I deliver care in MS. So I think that it's very, very important to have data at the ready when you're trying to help make decisions. I also think that it's important to have experience. I've been doing MS neurology for over 2 decades now, and being in clinic 5 days a week, seeing 20-some patients a day, year after year, you develop an eye for things. And so I really hope that when I sit down with a family to help them live their best life, to help make MS boring, that I can bring both my research experience and my understanding of the clinical literature and the data to help us make informed decision, and I can bring my real life experience of taking care of patients for over 20 years. Now, that's half the equation. What I bring to the table is half the equation. The other half is you. You're a you expert. You know more about you than any MRI, than any doctor, than any test or MS Olympics. You know more about you than your first degree relatives, than your friends and family. And so you're a you expert. So I come to the table having read a bunch of papers so that you didn't have to read them, and my experience caring for other families impacted by MS. And then you bring your expertise in your own body. And together, we're a team. Together, we can thwart out how to beat up on MS. Now here, Bluthton shares that the doctor that he's seeing has been doing MS for a really long time and won't prescribe drugs rougher or more robust than Tecfidera. Now, I have an opinion, which doesn't make me right, it just makes me really opinionated, that there are drugs that are unequivocally better than Tecfidera in groups of people. Now, Bluthton, as an example, is not a groups of people. That's one fella. But when I apply my understanding of data and knowledge, I want to bring the most effective disease-modifying therapy that you're comfortable taking. And that is not the most effective DMT that's out there. And so I absolutely would be discussing, should we be considering an upgrade? Now, that doesn't mean that you have to come off Tecfidera. If you're a super responder, you're a super responder. But I would not want to put you on something that's not terribly effective. For example, they may still make lambskin condoms. All right, so lambskin condoms are exactly what they sound like, and they're not very effective. They're not going to provide a 99.9% chance of preventing pregnancy. And so you might reach for a more modern latex condom because you want that efficacy. And I want the exact same thing for you when I'm trying to combat multiple sclerosis. I also think it's relevant. Someone who's been doing MS for 45 years remembers practice when there were no therapies. The very first therapy came out in 1993. And so that person remembers when there was nothing and then there was something. And so for that individual doctor, going from nothing to something is pretty revolutionary. It's transformative, and it is. But that's not where learning and data and information stop. Since Tecfidera's launch, we've had a host of other drugs come out, and many of them have been found to be more effective. So that's my 2 cents. It doesn't make me right. I'm not saying that your doctor's wrong, but I certainly have an opinion, and I appreciate you letting me share it. And thank you everyone who's jumped online right now. There's 189 of you that have jumped online, and that's amazing. Thank you very, very much. Let's take another question. So Joe Siders, one of our moderators, asks a very good question. Dr. B, do you know a site that posts current info on MS trials? And that's a great question. And yes, I do, Joe. So I'm going to type the answer in the chat, clinicaltrials.gov. I hope I spelled that right, but you can check that out in the chat. So there is a database called clinicaltrials.gov. And every single clinical research study has to be registered with clinicaltrials.gov, right, as like a safety thing. And so if you're wanting to look for clinical trials in MS, then you can go to clinicaltrials.gov. You can type in multiple sclerosis, and it will give you a readout of every trial that's ongoing right now, even tiny little trials that are ongoing for MS. That's one of many ways that you can learn about opportunities for MS research. What are some other ways that you can learn about opportunities for MS research? I'm going to answer that question after another sip of water. You know what time it is. MS Water Challenge, yo. So another way that you can learn about clinical trials is by looking up the National MS Society. So the National MS Society oftentimes has on their web pages lists of current trials. That's another location where you can look. Another place to look for clinical trials is to ask your treating neurologist, particularly if you have a neurologist that specializes in MS, maybe one that works at an academic center or a center like mine at the Boster Center. They may have a robust portfolio of clinical trials. I know, for example, we're doing about 15 clinical trials right now. And you can ask them, hey, what trials are you aware of that I might be eligible for? Or if you're not doing trials, doc, is there a local doctor that's doing them? That's another way to do it. Another way to do it is quite literally to call a local academic neurology department, so like University of whatever, and ask them which MS clinical trials they're actively participating in. If you think about it, if no one volunteered to do a clinical trial, if no patient with MS volunteered their body to participate in clinical trial, we would have 0 drugs available to treat MS. So when my Uncle Mark had multiple sclerosis, there weren't any therapies available. So the first therapy, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, came out in 1993. And at that point, my uncle was stuck in a wheelchair, not able to move his arms or his legs. And it was really too late for him individually to benefit from the early therapies that were coming out when they came out. It's a completely different world in 2025, and we have 28 different formulations of therapies. Why? Because people with MS volunteered their bodies. They did something heroic, where they volunteered to participate in a clinical trial so that we could find out something that works and something that works better. So I want to say thank you to every single person with MS who over the years have volunteered for clinical trials to help us find treatment, to help us find a way to make MS boring, and hopefully one day to find a cure. Without your help, we couldn't do this. So if you feel the love that I feel for people impacted by MS who volunteered for trials and who are heroic, spam that heart button for me. Go ahead and just hit that heart button like crazy. Show some love for those people because I think what they've done is absolutely amazing. Joe, that was a great question. Thank you for asking it. Here's another question that I am looking forward to answering. And this is a question from Donna. What can I eat to help with menopause? So let's take a bit of a deep dive into menopause. So when women hit around 45-ish, they can start to have clinical perimenopause, which means that their estrogen and progesterone has been dropping in the background, typically for almost 20 years at that point. And as those hormones start to drop, they start to have less scheduled menstrual cycles. And so they can start to become spread out a little bit. They can be a little bit random. And as they continue to have lower and lower estrogen levels, eventually, typically around 50 to 55, they may stop having a menstrual cycle completely and they enter into what's called menopause. Now, here's the dealio. When women impacted by MS have changes in hormone levels, we can see a shift in their disease. And in fact, we can see an uptick in their disease activity. And so even a woman who's having a monthly menstrual cycle can have an uptick in disease activity at various phases of her menses, which is super annoying and frustrating. There's been times where we have used birth control pills off-label where we skip the placebo. So we'll hold someone without a period for 3 months, and then they'll take the placebo so that they can have a menstrual cycle. And we do that to limit the number of menstrual cycles they have a year because they have so many MS symptoms that get worse during their menstrual cycle. Now, when a woman goes through menopause, there's a lot of changes that can occur. Things like hot flashes. But it goes way beyond that, sister. And in fact, we have good evidence that menopause can make MS worse. And so this has been studied, and what we have found is there tends to be slightly less relapses. So there's less relapses during menopause compared to premenopause, but we can see that the disease speeds up a little bit. The progression gets a little bit faster, which is yucky. And we can see that there's an uptick of symptoms, which are very common in MS, and they're common with menopause, and they get way worse when you have both. Things like fatigue, things like insomnia, things like irritability, anxiety, depression, things like problems with bowel function, problems with bladder function, and difficulty in the bedroom. It is a pain in the tushy to go through menopause and have MS. So what do we do about it? Well, I'm not sure that technically I can share, Donna, something that you can eat, but I'm going to sort of cheat because there's medicines that you can take, although we're not going to take them orally. I would recommend strongly that you talk to your obstetrician gynecologist or your treating primary care doctor about getting on estrogen-only topical hormone replacement therapy. So what is estrogen-only topical hormone replacement therapy? This is a patch or a cream that you put on your skin of estrogen, and it's absorbed through the body. The reason that I like topical is because oral estrogen can increase the risk of blood clots, which is bad for you. The reason I like estrogen only is it can decrease the risk of cancer. A lot of gynecologists have shied away from hormone replacement therapy, but I think we have to absolutely revisit this in the setting of I also have MS, doc. And so I encourage you, I empower you to talk to your obstetrician gynecologist about the data which has come out demonstrating that women impacted by MS who go through menopause can have an uptick of their disease activity, and that hormone replacement therapy is a heck of a way of trying to combat that. And so that's a conversation that I think needs to happen. And that's not exactly what you need to eat, but it's about as close as I can get, Donna. Thank you very much for asking the question. All right, let's take a look. So Cassie asks a question. Paraventricular white matter, corpus callosum, subcortical white matter lesions cause hallucinations possibly. So people impacted by MS rarely can have hallucinations. They can see things that aren't there. They can hear things that other people can't hear. And it absolutely comes from the brain damage caused by MS lesions. Although I don't think that we can identify a specific spot, I would not expect that to happen in subcortical white matter or the corpus callosum. Largely, we'd be looking at different centers of the brain. More people than you realize hallucinate. There are people walking around, working full-time, taking care of families, and they may see something that other people don't see, and they just don't talk about it. If you have hallucinations, bring that up to your neurologist. Typically, it's very easy to treat hallucinations. I can use a low dose of a drug that you take just before bedtime, and I can normally knock them out of the park. So I don't want you to be scared of that. I don't want you to be ashamed or embarrassed of that. Bring that up to your neurologist because that's something that we can easily treat. Now let's change up the scene, get a little bit of a different feel here. This is the river scene. I love this scene. There's 229 of you that have jumped online. Thank you, each and every one of you. Make sure that you share in the chat where you're jumping on from. It's always amazing to go back and look through the chat afterwards and see where all of these village members have amassed. Let's take another question here. So CDog70, which is a pretty cool name, asks, can you give some examples of conditions mimicking MS that can cause unpaired oligoclonal bands with clear blood tests? So when we diagnose multiple sclerosis, there's really 5 elements to an MS diagnosis: the clinical story, the examination, MRI, spinal fluid, which touches on CDog70's question, and hey, Aaron, prove it's nothing else. I'm Aaron. So the story, we're listening for MS attacks where there's been a clear-cut attack, or we're listening for a slow progression of disability like we see in PPMS. So really the clinical history, we're trying to extract that kind of information. The second thing, the examination, we're doing a neuro exam, which I sometimes jokingly call, the MS Olympics, where we have you follow the finger and do all the things, right? And the reason we're doing the MS Olympics is we're looking for evidence on exam to support your story. So for example, if you tell me that you lost vision in your left eye and it hurt when you moved it, and we're concerned that you may have suffered an optic neuritis, I'm going to shine a really bright light in the back of your eye, and I'm going to look at your optic nerve and see if it looks pale. If I see pallor of the disc, that's going to correlate with that experience and kind of help buttress it. The third thing we look at is the MRI. And honestly, CDog70, the MRI has revolutionized how we diagnose MS. There has been consistent updates in MRI utilization from the very first criteria that included MRI back in 2001. And in fact, we have brand new updates that came out just a few months ago where we have, again, upped our game. And we now have MRI technology looking for things like central vein sign, looking for things like paramagnetic rims, which are excellent at helping us better clear a diagnosis of multiple sclerosis. Next, we move on to spinal fluid, but first, MS Water Challenge, yo. You know how it works. When I drink, you drink. That's really good. Got to up your water game, guys. Now, when we look at number 4, that's spinal fluid. And when we draw spinal fluid via a lumbar puncture, I'm going to get my hand on camera, we also draw blood the same day. We need both. And what we're doing essentially is comparing the number of antibodies. So we're looking to see if there's more antibodies than we would expect in the spinal fluid. Under normal circumstances, with a normal immune function, we'll see a bunch of antibodies in the bloodstream and almost none or not very many at all in the spinal fluid. That would be considered normal. When there's a massive overproduction of antibodies in the central compartment, in the spinal fluid, more than what you see in the bloodstream, that's abnormal. And 90% of people impacted by MS have those changes. And so it's part of the diagnostic criteria that if you have positive spinal fluid, then that counts towards a diagnosis. And there's two tests in specific that we traditionally look for, and a new one that's been recently added. We look for something called unpaired oligoclonal bands, and that is a mouthful. Let me write that down for you. Oligoclonal bands, or OCBs. So we look for oligoclonal bands, and we look to see that you have two or more oligoclonal bands in the spinal fluid not seen in the bloodstream. We can look at another lab called the IgG index, and if the IgG index is above 0.7, that means the exact same thing. And with the newest update to the diagnostic criteria, which just came out, we also can look for something called kappa light chains. And so those are tests that we can do in the spinal fluid that increases the likelihood that that individual has MS. Now, that was not the question by CDOG70. CDOG70 said, could you give examples of mimics, which can mimic MS and cause O-bands? So there are several conditions that also can have oligoclonal bands. And essentially, any phenomenon, any illness that revs up your immune system in the central compartment could cause oligoclonal bands. So any central nervous system infection could cause the presence of unpaired oligoclonal bands. It could be abnormal. You can see other conditions that can do this. For example, there are some cousins of MS. There's one called NMO, which almost never has bands, and MOG, M-O-G, or MOG-AD. MOG sometimes can have bands, and MOG can mimic MS. And so if you see a patient with bands, we have to ask ourselves, could this person have MOG? Also, there's some evidence that healthy family members of people impacted by MS can have oligoclonal bands. So the point here is, one individual test by itself is not going to definitively say unequivocally yes to MS. It's really the constellation of those 5 elements that give us the security of saying, yes, we know the diagnosis. Now, there's 238 of you that have jumped online, and that's amazing. Thank you very, very much. I'm going to shift here, and I am going to share with you some very exciting information, something that I've been working on now for 2 years and finally launched. And so this is a really exciting update about the Boster Center for Multiple Sclerosis. Many of you that have been following the channel know that I worked in academics for a good portion of my career. And in 2020, I opened up the Boster Center for Multiple Sclerosis, a standalone MS center. Of course, 2 days later, the governor of Ohio closed the state because of COVID. So that was a really interesting way to start a brand new clinic. We fast forward 5 years into the future, and I am beyond proud of my team for creating a standalone MS center par excellence where we care for just under 3,000 families impacted by MS. However, I realized that I had created an error in the structure of the clinic. There were 3,000 families, 20 different team members work at the center, and I'm the only doctor. And so I started to get really nervous. I'm 50 years old. What if I fell sick? What if I was hit by a bus? Suddenly, the health care and the clinical care provided to those 3,000 families is absent. And that's a major, major concern. That's an error, a structural error in the way that I had set things up. And I started to look for a solution. How was I going to solve this problem? Well, I am delighted to announce that after 2 years of really hard work, the Boster Center has joined forces with a new healthcare organization called Single Point Healthcare. So the Boster Center has partnered with Single Point Healthcare, and we are going to do something which quite literally is revolutionary. We've taken my clinic as a base. And so if you boil it down, my clinic offers MS neurology. We do MS clinical trials research, quite a bit actually, and infusion medicine. Now, we have added a specialty pharmacy to that. And a specialty pharmacy is a really neat thing. It will allow us to mail our patients' medicines directly to their house, cutting out middlemen and making it much easier and more straightforward and probably more cost effective for them. We are in the process of hiring a rheumatologist and an immunologist. We are looking at bringing services like physical therapy and nutrition to our center and creating a hub for inflammatory disease activity, really creating a single point of contact to help allow people with inflammatory conditions, of course, MS, rheumatoid arthritis, other rheumatologic conditions, and immunologic conditions, and doing so in the outpatient setting. And then we're using that model and we're going to replicate it 10 times throughout the United States, literally creating a network of inflammatory chronic condition care, which I think will be really a leader in the way that we care for patients. I'm very, very excited about this. I'm now the Chief Medical Officer of Single Point Healthcare, and I'm really, really excited about what the next 5 years has to offer. Now, a couple things that I want to make really clear. The Boster Center is going nowhere, all right? I am going nowhere. I am working my tail off, as I love to do at the Boster Center, seeing my MS patients, and that's not going to change at all. The clinical trials program is going nowhere. On the contrary, it's going to grow big time. Our ability to provide infusion medicine is going nowhere. But what is changing for our patients is what we can offer them. Because soon we will have offerings for our patients that we didn't have before. For example, imagine that during your infusion, we give you an iPad and you talk face-to-face, one-on-one with a nutritionist. For example, we'll be able to bring physical therapy into the suite and help you in real time at our center. So I'm really excited about that. But it will also create lots of options that we don't have and help other inflammatory diseases and create a network of like-minded people. Now, on a personal level, this is really important for me because now, God forbid, something bad happens to me, my patients aren't going to suffer. So if you'd like to learn more about this exciting opportunity and this new adventure, I've put a link on the screen. See, it says singlepointhc.com. That's our website. So do me a favor and go to the website and check it out. And I am really, really excited about the future. One last comment, the YouTube channel ain't going nowhere. I will continue to make a new YouTube video every other Monday morning, as I've been doing for a very, very long time. And I will continue to do these live streams as long as you guys keep digging them. So I'm so excited to share that with you today. Thank you everyone for jumping online. If what I'm sharing makes sense to you, put a comment in the chat because I want to read kind of where your head and your heart are. And thank you for letting me share that very exciting news with you. I'm going to change it up. This is a peaceful scene. There's 239 of you that have jumped online. I've been talking a bit. I'm a little parched. You know what time it is. Delicious. All right, let's jump back into some questions, guys. Scrolling through the chat, looking for a question. So Chris asks a question worth answering here. Chris L says, can a person be diagnosed with who has MS develop peripheral neuropathy? And if so, what's the treatment? So my mentor was a gentleman named Dr. Omar Azar Khan. And Dr. Khan was very fond of saying, Aaron, sometimes nature's too generous and the person can have two things. So unfortunately, yes, someone can have multiple sclerosis, which is a condition that affects the brain and spinal cord and optic nerves, so the central nervous system. And multiple sclerosis, particularly damage from MS to the spinal cord, can cause numbness and tingling or pain. And that's neuropathic pain. And to be very nerdy, it's myelopathic pain. Myelo means spinal cord, so it's just telling you where the pain's coming from. Now, the nerves which leave the spinal cord are not part of MS. That's a different part of the nervous system. We call that the peripheral nervous system. And when a peripheral nerve, like for example, a nerve in your arm is damaged, that can cause neuropathy. Neuropathy means damage to a peripheral nerve. It's got a very specific meaning. And we don't see neuropathy in MS. We see neuropathic pain from the spinal cord, but not the peripheral nerves. There are many, many other conditions which can cause neuropathy. For example, diabetes oftentimes can cause a diabetic neuropathy. And I have many patients where nature is a little too generous, just like my mentor used to say, and they have MS and they have peripheral neuropathy. Now, we have to do a little bit of an exploration to figure out why they have peripheral neuropathy, because the treatment for that peripheral neuropathy might change based on what the reason is. And we can use medicines to dampen the discomfort. Now, here's where it gets a little bit interesting, because the medicines that we use to treat MS, neuropathic pain, and the medicines that we use to treat peripheral neuropathy, neuropathic pain, are the same medicines. That's exactly right. And so I use medicines like gabapentin, Lyrica, Cymbalta, Elavil, Pamelor, Topamax. These are all medicines all invented for other purposes, either to treat seizures or to treat depression, which have been shown to help with neuropathic pain, both peripheral neuropathic pain and central neuropathic pain. So that was a great question. Thank you for asking it. Let's go to the chat. I see a bunch of congratulations. Thank you, guys. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Thank you for your support, and thank you for your love. It means the world to me. And I'm really, really excited of what we can do to help more families impacted by MS and other chronic inflammatory conditions. So I'm going to bring you along on this journey as long as you're willing to come with me. Pamela Gregg asks a great question. So this is a super McDuper question from Pamela Gregg. And I like it so much, I'm going to change the scene. This is the tablet scene. And Pamela's question is as follows. Please explain active SPMS. Isn't SPMS by its very nature inactive? And so neurologists are hella nerds. We love labels and labeling things and making up acronyms, and it can be downright confusing. So let me deconstruct this for you. When someone has multiple sclerosis, we will typically diagnose them with either relapsing multiple sclerosis or primary progressive multiple sclerosis. Now, relapsing multiple sclerosis is someone with MS who has had at least one relapse. That's a relapsing form of MS. And it's characterized by, I have something bad happen to me, it sticks around for a couple weeks or months, and then it gets partway better. Then I have a period where things are relatively quiet. I might get a little bit worse, but relatively quiet, and then I have another attack. So they have relapses or attacks, and that's relapsing MS. This is in counterpoint to primary progressive MS, where primarily they've started progressing from the get-go and they don't have attacks. So let's focus our discussion on relapsing forms of MS. If you have a relapsing form of MS, some people, maybe upwards of 30, 40%, will go on as they age and they may find that they're not having relapses, but they are getting worse. So they're developing disability, but they haven't had an attack. And in that setting, we call that secondary progressive MS. They primarily had relapsing MS, and now secondarily they're progressing. So secondary progressive MS. And when someone has secondary progressive MS, I'm about to answer your question, Pamela, they're still at risk for attacks. So if someone has secondary progressive MS and they suffer an attack, we call that active or relapsing secondary progressive MS. If someone with secondary progressive MS has a new lesion on the MRI, we call that active secondary progressive MS. So non-relapsing secondary progressive MS is a way of saying they have SPMS, but they have not had an attack, right? And so we use this term activity or lack of activity as a modifier to describe the type of MS that we're discussing. Why is this relevant? Remember when I was talking about the Hercules trial? Hercules, Hercules, Hercules. And I was sharing with you that we enrolled secondary progressive MS patients that were non-relapsing. This means that the group of people that we grabbed for the trial have had relapses in the past. They have not had recent relapses, but they are getting worse. And we don't expect them during the trial to be having attacks. Bluntly, it's easier to treat an attack than it is to treat progression. If you had a bunch of people with active SPMS, with relapsing SPMS, your drug might be quelling relapses, and that's what's making the population look better. Here, we grabbed a population who's not having activity like that. And traditionally, it's been much, much harder to treat them. And it's really exciting that a medicine like tolebrutinib BTK inhibitor was able to impact their disease. So words are really important, and neurology can be a bit confusing, but thank you for hanging with me during that explanation. I hope that helps you understand. So Roland, which is a fun name, asks, how optimistic are you about AI in molecular research? With a Nobel Prize for protein structure and advances in AI, what realistic progress can we expect in the field? So AI has become like a buzzword. Artificial intelligence has become like very much of a buzzword, and it's talked about in all kinds of different forums these days, and medicine included. And I'll share with you that there's already aspects of AI which are involved in my clinical practice. I'll explain in a second. Actually, I'll explain right now. So one of the ways that we use AI at the Boster Center for MS is interpreting brain volume. So once a year, I ask my patient to get an MRI of the noggin, and we look at the white spots to see if any are new or any have enlarged. We look at the dark spots, same question, to see if there's new ones, black holes or enlarged black holes, because that would be bad. We also look to see if there's enhancing lesions when we give the contrast dye. But that's not all we look at. We also look at brain volume. And there's a special proprietary software called NeuroQuant, that's the software that we use, which measures the size of the brain and then calculates its volume and measures all the different component parts of the brain. You know, there's millions of not millions, but thousands of structures in the brain. And it measures them and it compares them to healthy controls. So when my patient and I are looking at the MRI together, I can pull up a chart and I can see where their whole brain size is compared to men, if it's a man, their age. Except they're the only person in that assessment that has a condition. All the other men are healthy controls that don't have any brain conditions. And it allows us to get a percentage where I can say your whole brain is 50th percentile, meaning it's literally middle of the road, or it's 99th percentile, it's a giant, giant brain, or it's first percentile and it's really small compared to a population of people your age. And I can take it a step further and I can look at individual parts of the brain. So for example, I'm very fond of looking at thalamic volume. AI does those calculations for us, all right? In fact, we couldn't do it without AI. There's another software, Icometrics, which does a very, very similar thing. And these are two proprietary softwares currently used in the MS space to measure brain volume, totally done by artificial intelligence. There's other softwares. NeuroQuant, for example, has a software that I don't personally use in my clinic, but it's called LesionQuant. And it goes in and it colors in the lesions and it shows you whether they've gotten bigger or not. And that's, again, an artificial intelligence software. I think that's a very, very important advancement in MS research, in an MS clinical practice. And it's something that I use in my practice with every one of my patients. There's another place where we use artificial intelligence. There are medical chat GPTs out there. And so there's something called I think it's open source. So if I just butcher that, sorry. But it's a free AI software where it will help our nurses generate letters in response to insurance companies. So we figure out in clinic that a person needs to go on a particular medicine, and then we apply for that medicine with the insurance. And sometimes the insurance says, okay, and sometimes they say, I don't want to do that. And they write a denial letter. And so we write a rebuttal letter back. And my nurses use these softwares to help make the letter robust by adding in relevant clinical research information with citations. And it's not that my nurses don't have an understanding of MS. It's not that they don't have access to the clinical papers. They have many of them on their desk. But this software generates it for them and helps them pull all this information together to make a very, very powerful letter to help the insurance company understand the absolute need for this person to go on that medicine. And that's another application of artificial intelligence, which we're using right now. So that's today, 2025, as I speak to you. We're using AI in the clinic for those purposes. Now, the question from Roland is a little bit of a futuristic question. It's saying, what do you think we might be able to do with AI as far as molecular research? Which, to me, I would translate into, what can we do AI to develop new MS medicines? And I think that the future is very, very bright. AI is not the end-all, be-all. It's not the cure for all things. AI is created by human beings. AI has to be fed information. And actually, AI doesn't think. It's like a really, really fancy calculator, right? So it's not like AI is doing its own thinking. That stated, I am very hopeful. I saw a paper recently where AI helped generate 2 possibly new antibiotics. That's amazing. And if AI can help identify new compounds like antibiotics, maybe one day AI can help identify new MS therapies. So the future is very bright and my fingers are crossed. And Roland, thank you for that question. That was a really good one. I'm going to change the scene again. Let's get this stuff off the screen. Can you guys hear me okay? Testing, testing. Just want to make sure you guys can hear me. I think the mic's on. Okay, it looks like it's on. Sometimes I flip to the scene of the past and the mic wasn't on and I'm jibber jabbering and everyone's going, I can't hear you. So good. Okay, I'm glad that's going well. All right, let's take another question. So Paige La Rosa asks a good question. She says, my doctor says they no longer categorize types of MS. You refer to different types a lot. My question is, if it's true, then why use those terms? And how can I find out which type I have? So Paige, the field of MS neurology does identify different types of MS. It's true. And we oftentimes talk about radiologically isolated syndrome, or RIS, clinically isolated syndrome, the first attack before you have any others, which could go on to be MS, relapsing MS, or sometimes people still use the term relapsing or remitting MS, secondary progressive MS, and primary progressive MS. Now, maybe what your doctor's referencing is, at the end of the day, those might all be the exact same condition, phenotypically expressed differently, right? So you can see 2 men that look very, very different. So I'm really short. I'm 5'6" on a good day if my hair's up. And I may stand next to a buddy of mine who's 6'9", right? So we're both male adult humans, but we don't look phenotypically the same because that guy's a giant and I'm a midget. And 2 people with MS may have different phenotypes. One may have primary progressive where they're slowly getting worse without attacks, and one may have lots of attacks. It may turn out that it's actually 2 different manifestations of the same disease. And so I can understand or empathize with your doctor saying, look, man, it's pretty much all the same thing. But when we do clinical research, we try to study them in individual types of MS. Now, I have a bunch of YouTube videos on this channel where I break down the different types of MS. I even have a video I think I made about a year ago on how do you know that it's PPMS versus relapsing MS? And so you might benefit from watching that video. In fact, if one of the moderators was able to dig that up and throw it out in the chat, that would be awesome. But to speak about it very, very briefly, if you have MS and you've suffered an attack, then you have a relapsing form of MS, period. Whether that's CIS, RRMS, SPMS, you have a relapsing form of MS. If you have a slow, steady decline in function in MS and you've never had an attack, you have primary progressive MS. And so that's a really dumbed down version of it. But I hope it helps you understand. And I would follow up with one of those videos that I've made just so you can up your game. Krista Silbert said hair up. Well, sometimes I wear my hair up, just to change it up a little bit. Sleep in rollers, a lot of volume, fantastic. Let's look at some other questions here, guys. So Cheryl VL says she was diagnosed in 2014. Husband just got diagnosed in June of 2025. I read that we are 1 in a million. What is the likelihood of child, both male and female, of developing MS when both parents have MS? So that's a good question. So MS is not sexually transmitted. And in my clinic, I have many, many couples where both the husband and the wife have MS. Oftentimes, they had MS before they got together, but sometimes, just like this, one will have MS, and then at a delay, the other one will get diagnosed with MS, which is not common, but does happen. And the question is what's the likelihood that their children may have MS? If one parent has MS, the risk of their children developing MS is about 1 in 40, so 1 out of 40. So hypothetically, if they had 40 children, then one of them would have MS, just mathematically. If both parents have MS, then the number is going to be higher, right? So they're going to have an even higher likelihood of developing MS. Now, that doesn't mean that all of your children are going to have MS. It doesn't mean that any of your children are necessarily going to have MS. It just means that they're at a higher risk. So let's change the question and talk about what could we do to waylay or stave off or prevent that from possibly happening. Because there are some things that we know about which increase or decrease a child's risk of ultimately going on to develop MS. The thing that we can't do, that we would like to do, is prevent them from getting mononucleosis or EBV, the kissing flu. It's believed that we must be exposed to EBV in order for the immune system to make an error in judgment and develop the pathology that leads to MS. And so in a future state, I pray that we'll have a vaccine for EBV. And if we immunize infants against EBV, I think we might eradicate multiple sclerosis. So that's not currently available. There is active research studying EBV vaccines presently, but we don't have them available. So that's not something that we can offer a child today in August of 2025. But there are other risk factors which are modifiable. The biggest risk factor which is modifiable is exposure to tobacco smoke. Now, very few children walk around smoking cigarettes, but many children may come in contact with secondhand smoke. And smoking, including secondhand smoke, can double a child's risk to develop MS. Double. That's really serious. Now, I don't know any parents that say, smoke up, Johnny, and they want their kid to smoke cigarettes. But if you have MS, if your children smoke, they double their risk. And so they would take that 1 in 40 and turn it into 1 in 20, and that's a very, very big deal. And so obviously, avoiding smoking and avoiding exposure to secondhand smoke can be very, very valuable in trying to help minimize the risk. What else can we do? It turns out that morbid obesity, so being very, very overweight, is an independent risk factor and increases the risk for MS almost by double, by about 80%. And so helping children stay physically fit and stay very active and not be morbidly obese is another very helpful tool. When I look at the vitamin D data, it looks like low levels of vitamin D amongst children increase the risk for them to go on to develop MS. Now, I am not telling you, Cheryl, to give your kids vitamin D. I am saying that you can talk with their pediatrician, and through their supervision, you can supplement their D3 and drive the level up above 50, which should help. There's some other data that suggests things like ultra-processed foods might increase the risk a little bit. There's some data that suggests that lack of breastfeeding may increase the risk a little bit. But my point here is we don't accept that laying down. Now, do you think that we should get MRIs on these children? I do not. I am not recommending that we randomly put children of people with MS into a scanner. But I think it's important that they understand MS just so that they understand what their mom and dad is going through. And if they developed new neurological symptoms, so if they developed, God forbid, a weakness, if they developed a numbness, a double vision, what have you, make sure they feel comfortable telling you so that we can then initiate a workup and do some scans and try to figure it out. So that was a great question. Thank you for asking it. Let's take another question from the chat. Looking around here for a question. Bluthton, by the way, one of our amazing moderators, found one of those videos I was referencing and put the link up in the chat. Bluthton, thank you for doing that. So this is a great question. And I'm not sure that I can pronounce your name, Alton. So if I said that wrong, I'm very, very sorry. Writes, what are the real differences between generic and original medicines in terms of safety, efficacy, and effectiveness? And this is a very, very germane question after I sneeze. Maybe not. I was just being teased with a sneeze. All right. So when a medicine is developed and approved by the FDA, it has about a 10-year run where no other manufacturer is allowed to try to make a copy of that medicine. After the medicine goes off its patent, then other manufacturers are allowed to make a knockoff, if you will. Now, if you're dealing with a pill, like a small molecule like Gilenya, okay, Gilenya is branded fingolimod, then you can make knockoffs and you can make other generic molecules. Now, this is a point of contention for me because when you develop the generic molecule, you're not required to prove that it works in humans. You're not. All you have to do is show the American FDA that your chemical molecule looks essentially the same as their chemical molecule, right? And if they look very similar, then it can get approved as a generic, not tested in humans. And I use the Gilenya example because generic fingolimod doesn't behave the exact same way that branded Gilenya does. And this has been studied. There's a great paper by a good friend of mine named Dr. Darren Akuda. He was one of the authors on this paper that looked at the behavior of generic fingolimod, looking at what's called pharmacodynamics and kinetics, like the way the medicine is metabolized in your body and whatnot. And it wasn't the same. And that's really, really upsetting because when I prescribe someone Gilenya, as an example, I know what I'm getting. We have very, very detailed information in people impacted by MS. I was involved in those trials, and I have a lot of understanding of that. When I'm prescribing a generic, not the same thing. Now, I do want to make a distinction because there's another term that gets floated around called a biosimilar. A biosimilar is not the same thing as a generic. So when you have a biologic drug, so not a pill, but like a monoclonal antibody, like an infusion, those antibodies are biologic products. They're antibodies. They're made in a laboratory. And these biologic products are collections of proteins to make antibodies. And you're not allowed to make a generic. You can't make a generic of a biologic agent, but you can make a biosimilar. When you make a biosimilar, a different manufacturer builds the exact same antibody in a different laboratory. And then they're required to do clinical trial studies in humans with the condition to prove that it's equivalent. And so, for example, there's a drug, a very, very effective drug called natalizumab. Natalizumab, there's a branded drug called Tysabri, which has been around on the market since 2004. And natalizumab Tysabri is one of the most effective drugs used to treat MS. There's enough time has gone by because it came out in 2004 that the patent has resolved, and they've made a biosimilar. So there's a drug called Teruco. Teruco is also natalizumab, but it's a biosimilar. And I think over the next 5 years, you're going to see other biosimilars come to market. And I have more confidence in giving someone a biosimilar than I do a generic because the biosimilar is tested in that population. Now, we've been rocking and rolling for almost an hour. We have 2 minutes until the top of the hour. My name's Aaron Boster, and as always, thank you for learning about MS with me. I'm going to continue to enjoy these live streams as the highlight of my month. Thank you to 250 of you that saw fit to jump online today. If you'd like to know when I go live next, please consider signing up for the Boster Corner. It's a free online newsletter which tells you when we jump online so that you don't miss any of the upcoming events. And remember, if you're interested in learning more about Single Point Healthcare, this new entity that I am so excited to be partnering with, I want you to go to the singlepointhealthcare.com website where you can learn more. I will see you next month, and as always, thank you for learning about MS with me. Be safe and take care, guys. Have a great rest of your day.